Just over 1 year ago, I went through some of the worst pain I had ever experienced, and with the pandemic being in full swing, it was hard not to get in front of a doctor without going to a hospital. I really didn't want to go to a hospital, and with not being properly diagnosed while also having slightly different symptoms than people do with appendix issues, that time delay resulted in my appendix bursting, almost 3 days before I went to the emergency. As you can imagine, with a perforated appendix leaking directly into my abdominal cavity for that many days, the infection was very severe. So much so that it was actually too dangerous to operate, so I still got my appendix. Now, I've already outlined my appendix story in the first video I did, which you can check it in the description. So in this video, we're going to be running through why my situation was different, what the recovery was like, how I'm doing a year later, and with the most commonly asked questions surrounding appendicitis, such as why it happened, the dangers and risks, what it feels like, what happens if it's not removed, and also sharing my suggestions knowing what I know now so that if you think you have appendicitis, you can make it through this challenge with much less discomfort. So make sure that you watch all the video. So I want to start off with why my situation led to only getting to the hospital 3 days after my appendix burst, because while it may seem that the symptoms are obvious, they can actually vary a lot from person to person. For example, I never had any nausea, vomiting, nor diarrhea, which can be pretty common in most people. I didn't even have the rebound pain when trying to self-diagnose by pushing down on the appendix area and letting go quickly. And this test is an easy way for most people to tell that they actually have appendicitis and need to get to the hospital. But the rebound test did nothing for me. And if you don't have a result from this either, then let us know in the comments by typing no rebound pain. So aside from the obvious that I really didn't want to go to the hospital during the pandemic in April of 2020, I wasn't just being fearful. In fact, a walk-in clinic doctor that I spoke to over the phone around the second day of pain told me that my symptoms make it more likely that I had a blockage in my small intestine. So he gave me a prescription for an intestinal muscle relaxer and suggested booking an appointment for blood work and an ultrasound. So I booked one, but the earliest appointment was 6 days out. And this is where a lot of my problems could have been alleviated. So I'll give you the next level tip here that if you have severe abdominal pain, get your ass to the emergency room. You'll understand an even greater importance to this later on in the video. Needless to say, those intestinal muscle relaxers did nothing. But what did work like a charm though were over-the-counter pharma painkillers like Tylenol and Advil. These were things I actually avoided for close to 15 years in my life, and while they helped me to be in much less pain and actually able to walk, they unfortunately only delayed how long it took me to get to the hospital. I thought I could wait it out for the ultrasound, but nope. And again, I highly suggest to you that if you've got severe abdominal pain, get moving to the emergency room. So because of how long I waited, the fact that my appendix had already burst, it was releasing highly infectious fluid directly into my abdominal cavity, creating another type of infection called peritonitis. The name isn't important. All you need to know is that this takes the severity of the situation to a much more life-threatening case, which leads me to tell you why it wasn't actually taken out. You see, with appendicitis, the infection in your appendix is isolated. It's contained, so it's much easier to operate on without spreading that infection. But the risk and complications go way up if that infection is already spreading all over. The surgeon specifically told me that I was very, very fortunate to be in such good overall health that they didn't need to do an emergency operation, which if they did, would likely have resulted in them needing to remove part of my colon. Yeah, you heard me right, and this would have left me with a permanently f***ed digestive system, one of the many things I am grateful for in my life. The last 72 hours before getting to the hospital, I did a water-only fast, as I knew from my 6+ years of experience with intermittent fasting that this can regenerate and really elevate the power of your immune system, killing off weaker white blood cells through autophagy, and increasing your white blood cell count to really aid in fighting the infection. The reason that you don't want to wait nearly as long as I did is because of the agonizing recovery time. I went through significantly more pain for more days, 10 days in the hospital, in fact, with extreme pain that wouldn't go away until the infection could safely be drained out. If it didn't burst, I would have gone to the emergency. They would have got the infection under control, either via antibiotics or immediately operating to remove it. I would have been in the hospital for likely 2 to 3 days tops, high as a kite, and 2 weeks of easy at-home recovery with no heavy lifting nor exercises other than walking for those 2 weeks. What actually happened though was 10 days of lying in a hospital bed in the worst pain of my life. The morphine and 1,000 milligrams of extra strength Tylenol every 6 hours was never enough to last me until the next dose interval, so the pain would surge back for those last 2 hours while I waited. Then taking another 90 minutes of the added pain of trying to digest those pills on what was then day 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on of having a completely fasted empty stomach. Adding to this, there were no visitors allowed due to COVID, and I couldn't sleep on my sides at all. It was pretty much the most comfortable version of hell at that time. And if you can sympathize, then definitely hit the like button to let me know. Anyway, I know I'm rambling on and on here, so let's make this quick. By day 8 and 9, my body had worked its magic and created a solid abscess. Basically a protective layer to isolate the infection in my abdomen. So it was time to stick a drain tube in me to get that infection out. With the drain tube in, flowing that juiciness out, the pain was finally subsiding. Then I asked the doctor how long I'd have to keep it in for, and they suggested 1 to 2 weeks. And definitely not to lift anything, or else it would come out and I'd have to go right back to the hospital. And clearly that was the last place that I wanted to go to. 2 weeks later, I went in to see the surgeon to hear of another surprise. My body was doing something really rare by creating a fistula. Basically my body's own tube all the way from here to the hole in my appendix. So what did this mean? 4 more weeks with that rubber tube inside my gut. 4 more weeks of limited mobility, 4 more weeks that I couldn't exercise, 4 more weeks of not being able to sleep on my sides, and this lingering depression of feeling so far away from my normal self. And did I mention that this tube constantly smelled like internal sewage? Okay, I promise I'm done complaining now. There are actually a number of blessings that this provided to me in my life as well. A lot of things that I have to be grateful for within that experience. And while I'm not going to get into reframing your past, navigating depression and traumas, those are some of the topics that I do cover on this channel, so consider subscribing if you're interested in becoming the next level version of yourself. Anyway, let's get into answering the most commonly asked questions. What does appendicitis pain feel like? So this is typically a very sharp pain in the lower right abdomen around the location of it, though you can feel it more towards the center of your belly button as well. And while this pain will be relevant for most people, I was one of those people which the pain was much more spread around. The pain I had before it ruptured. So what does a burst appendix feel like? It f***ing sucks. I've never felt anything worse than that. It was like this constant knife-stabbing sharp pain that would come in waves. And after it burst, while the infection was spreading, it affected a nerve that connected directly down to my jewels, which basically made it feel like having the worst additional pain of blue balls I think any man could ever experience. This specific pain did stop within 2 days of antibiotics though while I was in the hospital. There are a few things that can cause it, such as a virus, a bacterial infection, digestive parasites, or inflammatory diseases of the GI tract, but the most common by far is typically some sort of blockage of the opening to your appendix in your colon. This is what happened to me, which you can see in my CT scan here. There was a tiny calcified piece of feces that somehow got Michael Jordaned perfectly into the opening, causing the blockage. This prevents your appendix from being able to flow out the good bacteria into the colon as needed, causing an infection that gets out of control. You won't experience any of the risks of surgery, which do exist. These modern days, there are less surgical removals happening and more being treated with antibiotics. So in the case of not getting it removed, from what I was told by the surgeon, is that within the first 2 years, you have a higher chance of getting it again. And the older you are past the age of 30, the much less chance you have of actually getting it. Can you survive a burst appendix? I sure did. But not everyone may be so lucky or in good health. So you need to get your ass to the emergency room ASAP. Don't wait as long as I did. Without medical attention, even with just appendicitis, roughly 50% of people can die from it. And that risk is even higher if your appendix bursts or becomes perforated like mine did. Waiting is not worth the risk. So since then, my digestive health has come back to excellent levels. I've rebuilt all my digestive flora after my heaviest antibiotics experience ever during that hospital stay. It took about 2 months to regain all of my strength and muscle mass back from the time that the tube came out on June 1st of 2020. And I've been very fortunate not to have any further issues. At least not with my appendix. I did, however, injure my back and dislocate my shoulder separately on a really bad fall that actually took me to my second hospital experience in the same year. Just a few of the wild things that I experienced in the year of 2020, which you can check out in the next video here, where I outline how journaling every day for 12 months straight throughout the pandemic literally saved my mental health. And for all of you that made it to the end here, please know that regardless of the pain that you're in, the worry that you might be experiencing with your appendix, yes, it's going to be challenging, but you're going to make it through. And you'll definitely be stronger as a result. So I'll see you in the next one, warriors.